Hey, welcome back to the podcast, The Insecure Overachiever, with me, Jason Suarez. Today I have a very special guest, Luis Preto. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience?
As you just said, my name is Luís Preto. I was born in England, raised in Portugal. Both my parents are Portuguese. I ended up deciding to study initially sports sciences. That took me to an undergrad in physical education and a couple of master's degrees, one in teaching methodologies and the second one in high performance coaching.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself led me to start writing some things. It all ended up then culminating in writing a few books, including one on physical conditioning.
Yeah, so basically that's our topic for today. We're going to dive into the book you wrote called Managing Training Made Easy, right?
Exactly.
It's one of many books that you have, so people can
Yes.
find other... Hi, good morning. We're not open.
Oh, yeah, it's closed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
See you.
No problem. Okay, well, reset. No, I'll just start where I started before.
Whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so basically that's today's episode. We're going to take a deep dive into your book and a lot of your ideas related to the ideas of physical training and performance. Your book is called Managing Training Made Easy. And one of the ideas that you go through there, just to start us off, was the idea of training BS, training bullshit, right?
Yes.
What do you try to explain to others by saying that?
Well, I got the concept of training BS from a book from an American author coach and author named Michael Yessis. He also was a very highly respected sports scientist. I believe he was the first American to start reading and studying sports sciences from the former Soviet Union, because I believe his parents were Russian, and so he was able to read and understand Russian. And so he wrote a book, and he called it Sport, Is It All BS? In the sense that there is it's quite frequently for people to fail or to struggle in identifying the critical elements that will lead to an improvement in their sport-specific performance. And in the absence of such knowledge, it is common for people to just either follow traditions or try to do a little bit of everything, like cross-training. And I guess my understanding is that it will seem like pretty obvious what I'm going to say, which is that, like, if someone wants to improve their performance in, say, basketball, it will not make any sense for that person to start practicing, I don't know, like tennis or snooker or skiing, under the impression that those other sports will transfer and improve the person's performance in his or her own sport, namely basketball. And so that may seem like pretty obvious, but when it comes to physical conditioning, unfortunately, that's what has a tendency to occur. People not being able to realize which specific physical conditioning exercises and methodologies will actually transfer into their sport-specific performance in a way as to improve it. And in the absence of such awareness, they end up either just blindly following traditions or trying to branch out and do a little bit of everything, hoping that they will get something right. And that's all obviously far from ideal.
Right. There's too many excessive variables in physical training.
Exactly.
So then you propose basically in your book an alternative view on physical training. I would love for you to talk about that,
Okay.
but I'd like people also to understand just briefly what the traditional point of view is, and then I'll ask you what your not contradicting, but your separate view is. Could you just explain a little bit what's the traditional view on
It
physical
makes
conditioning?
sense. it makes sense to start with overall recap. If you open, like, I would say, or I would risk saying, like any book on physical conditioning, training methodologies, you always see physical conditioning broken down into 4 components, 4 categories: that of strength, endurance, speed, and flexibility. And then, as if that weren't enough, each of these categories is then broken down into subcategories. Like, for example, strength is divided into maximum strength, explosive strength, endurance strength. Even explosive strength tends to also be subdivided even further into starting strength and accelerative strength. And then you also have different types of endurances, different type of speeds, different types of flexibility, like dynamic, active, passive, static. And so what ended up happening to me was that I ended up like studying this at the university. I ended up reading all these different books that all argued their case in favor of such systematization. And then at the end of the day, I would always feel that I would be lacking both the time and energy to practice all these different physical abilities, all this like wide range of physical conditioning attributes. And then on top of that, also have even an additional time and energy to also include my own sport-specific practice. And so I felt that such a complex situation was unmanageable. I couldn't actually like implement it in practical terms, and so I rattled my brain in order to try to figure out a way to simplify physical conditioning in a way as to serve my sport-specific practice, my sport-specific performance to the best of my ability.
So as a solution, you developed an alternative view on
did.
physical conditioning.
Yes.
What does that alternative view implicate?
So basically, I figured out a way to shorten this model from 4 components to 2 components. And so simply put, I eliminated flexibility and speed because it is my understanding that these components are already included within the strength component of physical conditioning. And so instead of until a person is able to figure out that both speed and physical and flexibility are already included within the strength component, if a person doesn't understand that and actually tries to practice all these different physical abilities, it just like ends up producing an unnecessarily complex situation.
Okay. So then you take out speed, right, and flexibility.
Yeah, I don't actually take them out, but the thing is that it's like, for example, if you have a race car, you have a race car, like you have like the engine, and the power of the engine is the thing that is actually like propelling the car in space. And obviously that as the car is moving in space, you are able to record like the distance that the car covered, and you are also able to record the time it took. And using these 2 components, distance and time, you are able to calculate speed, the speed at which the car was displaced in space. But so like the speed, like there is such a thing as speed, but speed is the product. It's not the actual thing that is generating the product. It's the outcome. And so the engine, the ability of the engine to be powerful, to actually like propel that mass, that car in space, that's the critical element. Then speed ends up being the outcome. And so you can record speed, and then obviously we can record speed, we can record the outcome in order to judge whether our training was actually able to impact the power, the engine in terms of its ability to produce power. We can and should use our notions of outcome in order to judge how effective our training was able to impact the actual engine of the car, or in this case, the engine of the human body. But the outcome isn't a training variable by itself, and so
that's why you called training explosive strength and speed redundant, right?
Exactly. And so, but it's like, if a person, like, what's the engine of the human body? The engine of the human body is that of muscle contraction, and so we have a body, which is, like everyone, I assume everyone knows, is our body is composed by a skeleton, by bones, and on top of these bones we have muscles. And for example, here the arm. Are you able to record my arm?
Only if you lift your arm up a little bit. Otherwise, I can redirect it.
No, that's okay. That's okay. So, but in any body segment, in this, let's imagine the arm. You have the bone, and then you have muscles on the front part. You've got the biceps, but the muscle, the biceps, don't cover the whole body segment. They don't cover the whole bone. At each end, the muscle transitions into a different tissue called the tendons. And so the central part is the muscle tissue, and then at both ends you've got tendon tissue that connects the muscle to different bones. And what happens is that as the central portion, the muscle tissue, shortens, then it will pull on the extremities, it will pull on the tendons. The tendons will stretch a little bit, but because their ability to stretch is very limited, very quickly they will transfer that pulling force onto the attaching bones. And so what happens is that through muscle shortening, you are able to pull on the tendons pull on the bones, and if this happens with an intensity that is high enough to place in motion the mass that you wish to place in motion. In this case, if you are shortening the biceps, usually you are doing so in order to flex your elbow, in order to bring your forearm and your hand closer to your face. And so if the shortening of the muscle tissue that is pulling on the tendons, and the tendons then are pulling on the bones, is strong enough, has enough intensity in order to place that mass in motion, then we witness the displacement of a body segment. And the muscle shortening is the engine behind human movement. And so what happens is that muscle shortening can occur at different rates, and so a muscle can shorten at a very slow pace or at a faster pace. And if the muscle shortens at a faster pace, we're calling it explosive strength. And so anytime we shorten our muscle tissue, and then the muscle tissue is pulling on the tendon, then we always designate this as an event which is generating force. And so if the muscle shortens in a way very, very fast, then we call that type of force generation explosive strength. And then obviously, as I stated earlier, using the analogy of the race car, if we record the body segment, the forearm and the hand being displaced in space, if we record the displacement and the time, we are able to characterize the output in terms of its movement speed, in terms of the velocity. But this gets us to the same conclusion, which is that speed ends up being an output characteristic that allows us to characterize the output, characterize movement.
Yeah.
But then as a coach, as an athlete, when we go to our drawing board in order to figure out what to train, how to train, and in order to influence, impact which variables, in this case, the engine that produces movement, the engine is the ability of the muscle to shorten either very fast or a little bit slower, but reaching maximum intensity in order for that muscle shortening to be conveyed onto the tendons and then onto the muscles. Right. And so muscle shortening is strength, and strength can generate, we can use strength, muscle shortening, muscle strength, in order to generate the maximum strength that muscle is able to generate, or the maximum strength within a limited time window.
Mm-hmm. Like pushing max the speed.
Yeah, because let's assume that that a certain muscle, the biceps, let's assume that it takes like a full second in order to generate the maximum shortening, the maximum strength, the maximum force that it is able to generate. It requires a full second in order to generate maximum strength. But now let's assume that a person is able to needs to perform like a very quick action. Now, so let's see, instead of let's transfer from the biceps to the triceps. Let's assume that, for example, you're simply like, for example, at a pub, like throwing darts, and so you are extending the elbow, and so in order to extend the elbow, you need to shorten the muscle which is opposite to the biceps, so the triceps, and let's assume that the ability for the triceps to shorten and to produce the maximum strength, the maximum force that it is able to generate, let's assume that it takes a full second. But you don't take a full second in order to perform the extension of the elbow when throwing a dart. Let's assume that throwing the dart only takes like a quarter of a second. So like the triceps, needs like a full second in order to generate the maximum force that it is able to generate. But the action of throwing a dart only allows you, for example, a quarter of the second in order to generate strength. Yeah. And so the maximum amount of strength that a person is able to generate when faced with a limited time window in order to do so, then we call this explosive strength. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so what does this mean? This means that within this paradigm of looking at training or approaching training under the intention of improving your ability to produce muscle contractions, then you just focus on the engine and you only have one variable. But within the former model, the four-component traditional model, you were led to think that you needed to perform certain exercises in order to improve strength, and other exercises in order to improve speed. And that's not the case. And so within the same exercise, in this case, using an exercise to improve explosive strength, then you are improving your ability to, or you are improving your muscles' ability to shorten much faster. And so you are improving your explosive strength, which will lead to an improvement in terms of outcome, in terms of muscle, in terms of movement speed. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. What about when it comes to like running and sports like that? Is it the same situation?
It's the same situation. And so,
for example, for gym work, but then when you go to the track,
yes.
Do you have to then differentiate it, or how does that work?
So the thing is that strength is
because in gym work, what you're suggesting is perfectly, like, it makes perfect sense. But then, like, if you have to go train on a running track, you're still technically training speed, or no? I don't know. I'm asking. I'm curious.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I also had that same doubt a few years ago, and for me the answer came in a very simple manner, which is that speed, everything about one's ability to produce muscle contractions, everything is very specific. So your ability to generate strength is muscle specific. And so if you train your biceps, you improve the biceps' ability to produce strength, and not that of the triceps. But then even within the biceps, if you focus on improving your ability to produce muscle shortening, the muscle shortening of your biceps in a specific angle, then you improve mostly you improve your ability to produce a muscle contraction in that angle and its surrounding angles. Okay, so everything is very specific. But ultimately, when you go, for example, when you are training, strength training, when you are like lifting weights and stuff like that, it is usually people refer to that as strength training. Okay.
Okay.
But when you go to the track, people usually think that that's speed. But the thing is that what are you doing in the gym when you are lifting weights? You are placing certain masses in motion. You are displacing them in space. Okay, you are lifting a barbell, or if you're performing a squat, you are displacing your body eventually with an added mass of the bar and the weights, the barbell, and so you are displacing a mass in space. What are you doing when you go to a track and when you are running? You are extending your lower limbs, you are extending your hip, you are extending your knee, you are extending your ankle in order to displace your body in space. Okay, so it always goes back to the same phenomenon, that of getting your muscles to shorten in order for the respective muscles to pull on the tendons, and the tendons to pull on the bones, and thus generate movement. So it's also, the phenomenon is always that of muscle shortening, and the outcome is always the same, that of body segments being displaced in space. Then what happens is that, and so it's the phenomenon. So it's, for me, it makes sense, and it simplifies things if we actually like throw out the window both at least when we're thinking about training, throwing out the window the concepts of strength and speed, and replace them with the concept of muscle shortening. If you think about muscle shortening, I want to improve the ability of muscle X, Y, and Z to contract, to shorten, and to shorten either over 2 seconds or to shorten over like a quarter of a second, and within these ranges of motion. If you think about that, then everything in training becomes specific, becomes understandable, and very easily transferable into your sport-specific practice. Because then what happens is that, for example, what's the difference? What happens is that like in the gym, regarding training your lower limbs, people mostly focus, or traditionally people have mostly focused on performing the squat. But in the squat, how is your center of gravity being displaced in the squat when you are squatting? Your center of gravity is mostly being displaced vertically, okay? And so that means that when performing squats in a gym with added weights, that type of strength improvement will transfer mostly into jumping, which is when you are displacing your center of gravity in a vertical manner. Then, for example, if you want to improve your running, how is your center of gravity being displaced in running? Mostly horizontally. Yeah. And so, if you focus your strength training on performing squats, and then if you don't see that actually transferring and translating into an improvement in your running speed, that might get you to think, okay, so I need to perform strength training, and then I need to also perform like speed training. Right. I need to actually perform. I need to actually train my skill, in this case speed, in order to improve speed. Now the thing is that like you went back, you basically like that leads, this leads us back to the initial concept of training BS.
Right.
You were simply following a traditional methodology that led you to practice, to train like squats, because that's traditional and that's what most people do. But the thing is that if you think about strength generation in a way that it is movement specific and angle specific, then you will replace the practice of squats with, for
Another
example,
exercise.
running with horizontal resistance. Initially, the first or horizontal resistances that coaches developed was that of parachutes, and then they started. And nowadays, it is very common for them to have like bands around them and having a colleague pulling or offering resistance, so that you are actually being offered a horizontal resistance, and that gets you to actually have to contract your muscles within the running specific movement, within the running specific angles of joint displacement, in a way for those muscles to contract either in a way that they reach either more strength within that short time window that you are afforded in order to produce that action. Okay,
So still being explosive strength.
so it's always it's
Okay.
still being explosive strength. Okay,
Makes
this
sense.
this idea that if I'm performing a movement against very if I'm looking to displace just like a tiny bit of mass, like for example, if I'm holding a glass of a beer and I'm flexing my arm in order to bring the beer glass towards my face, I'm displacing my forearm, my hand, and my beer glass. Let's consider that this totals, like for example, 5 kilograms. And now let's compare that with actually performing the same action, but while holding like a 20 or 25 kilogram dumbbell. And so so the movement is the same, but in one circumstance, I am placing in motion 5 kilograms of mass in a scenario A, while in scenario B, I'm placing in motion a mass of five times more, 25 kilograms. So it's always the same movement, always the same muscle contraction, and always placing the same, always producing the same movement, the same displacement, but again against different amounts of mass.
Right.
The idea that when I'm displacing a small amount of mass, that we call it speed. And the idea that when I'm displacing a large amount of mass, I'm calling it strength. I'm just like overcomplicating the whole scenario, when in fact the fuel, the engine that produced both movements was the same, that of muscle shortening. Okay.
Great. That's a great way to resume it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, like, still staying on the topic of speed a little bit. We talked about each like physical ability, strength, endurance, flexibility, speed, having their own almost sub words, right? Within speed, you have like maximum speed, you have speed, reaction speed, we have speed of acceleration, right? You in the book specifically state that you don't consider reaction speed to be a physical ability. I'd like you to explain that a little bit to me.
Okay. Because so let's start. I will start by saying that I consider that reaction speed is a training variable, but not a physical ability. Why is that? Because what is the definition of reaction speed? So reaction speed is the time it takes for you to start reacting to a given stimulus. And so you have two different types of reaction speed, simple and complex. Simple is when you already know the stimulus that you are expecting. Like for example, a sprinter, he knows that like he's going to hear the sound of the gun going off, and so he knows the stimulus and he knows the response that he needs to produce. And so the sprinter is standing on the starting blocks, and so it's like he already has the motor program of like starting to run like activated, and it's like he has like his finger on top of the enter key, and he's just like waiting for the stimulus in order to press the enter as to like so as to activate that motor program. That's simple reaction speed. In complex reaction speed, even you either don't know the stimulus, and so you need to read the environment in order to figure out, for example, within a game oriented sports, you're guarding like an opponent, and even if you are only presented with two options, the opponent can go to your left or to your right. Even within a simple scenario of only being confronted with two potential scenarios, still that leads you to not knowing what your opponent is going to perform.
Exactly.
And so you need to read what your opponent is going to perform, and sometimes even when your opponent, for example, goes to your left, he goes to your left, but performing different things, okay, and soliciting like a reaction A of the type of reaction A, B, or C from you. And so in complex reaction speed, you don't have already your finger on the enter button, on the enter key. You don't know what you're going to perform. You need to read your opponent, and you need to figure out what you want to perform, and then get that retrieve that motor program and upload it and activate it. And so what happens is that, but in either situation, simple reaction speed and complex reaction speed, so as I said earlier, its concept is that of measuring how long it takes you to start moving. And so you have a stimulus, either a known stimulus or an unknown stimulus, and it takes you a while for you to be able to activate your muscles and start moving. And as soon as you start moving, you stop the counting, and you designate that time interval as reaction speed. And so this means that reaction speed measures the amount a time interval during which there is no movement. As soon as you start moving, then you eventually time how long it takes you to move, and then that allows you to calculate or to characterize your output in terms of the time it took you to move, and thus the movement speed, the average movement speed that you incurred in, as we covered earlier.
Right, so that's trainable, but it's not a physical ability.
Wow. Yeah, of course. And so like you don't need to go into a strength training room in order to improve your reaction speed. It's while you are practicing your sport, your specific sport, while you are improving your technique and most notably your tactical skill within your sport-specific performance, as that improvement or all those sport-specific practice sessions in which you are looking to improve your tactical awareness, your tactical processing, and your reaction in order to be able to become more competent at reading your environment, reading your opponents, and adjusting accordingly. All that improvement in terms of tactical skill includes your ability to process everything faster and react faster. And so although all your sport-specific practice geared towards improving your tactical skill generates improvements in what we call reaction speed. But basically,
I think we had a conversation before about it. You were explaining that's not physical. That's why it can't be considered
it's your
physical.
processing ability. It's your processing ability. So let's consider, and probably I guess rightfully so, that computers have been built in the image of their creator, us. And so just like computers have their software, hardware, and so they have their CPUs, we also have our own CPUs, we have our own processing abilities. And so reaction speed is a training variable in the sense that it relates to your greater or lesser ability, greater or lesser skill, competence in processing your environment and reacting to it. But it isn't a physical ability because it is measuring your processing ability. It is measuring time intervals during which there is no movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot, so going to a training hall, a strength training hall, to lift weights in order to improve your ability to displace your body segments in space, that is not reaction speed, that is movement speed. And movement speed that is being generated by your explosive strength, by your ability to have your muscles shortening, contracting at a faster rate. Okay, right. While reaction speed is something that characterizes your ability to quickly process the environment and react to it. Okay, but so it has to do with tactical awareness, being competent from a tactical standpoint in terms of reading your opponents, your environments, and reacting to them. It has to do with your software. It doesn't have to do. It has to do with what happens behind the scenes before movement starts being produced. As soon as movement starts being produced, then we are in the presence of,
and also the electrical current that goes through our body, right?
Exactly.
The impulses and all
exactly.
That. Okay, that was good. Let's switch over a little bit to then flexibility, because you also said flexibility you didn't really consider important to train and separate. In your alternative view, explain that a little bit to me and to the audience.
Well, once again, the same circumstance applies to flexibility, in the sense that I consider it also a training variable, just not its independent component, independent category that needs like its own specific time and space to be trained, to be practiced, to be improved on. And why is that? Let's think about this again, the same example, in order to try to pinpoint the situation and explain it as simply as I can. Let's go back to the same scenario I mentioned earlier of being at the pub and throwing darts. The movement that is generating the extension of the elbow, as we've already covered, is the triceps, the muscle or the group of muscles that is at the back portion of our arm. And so the triceps shorten, and by shortening, they pull on the tendons pull on the respective bones, and that produces the extension of the elbow.
Yeah.
What happens is that simultaneously, as every time one muscle from one side of the body segment, every time one muscle shortens in order to produce the movement of that body segment, then every time there is an extension, it means that the muscle on the opposite side gets stretched. Okay, and so what happens is that every time, if you move your body segments through their full range of motion, then it means that when you get to the end of your range of motion, you are always extending, stretching the muscle on the opposite side. And so when I am extending the elbow through the contraction of the triceps, the biceps is getting extended. If I do the opposite, if I flex my elbow through the contraction of the biceps, then the triceps is getting extended. Okay, and so what happens is that
that's the part that's related to flexibility, right?
Yeah,
the ability to extend.
Exactly, which is why, even like it is, my understanding is that it is fairly well known amongst people with average to high experience in strength training. It is common knowledge that when you start performing squats with weights, and especially when you perform squats using like wide stances, like those stances that are usually called sumo stances, And if you perform squats with wide stances and going through a wide range of motion, you will improve your hip range of motion. Then suddenly, for example, so you don't undergo any specific flexibility training. You don't undergo any training geared towards improving your range of motion. Right. You simply undergo strength training, but by doing so, using squats, so with weights, and through using like wide stances and going through a wide range of motion, then one day, for example, you're sitting on the floor with some friends, you look to like open your hips in order to check your range of motion, and suddenly you notice, you are usually like sometimes surprised to notice that your range of motion has increased, that your ability to open your hips and to move your legs away from each other has increased, and without having incurred in any flexibility training. Because what happens is that if you perform strength training using movements that get you to move, to displace your body segments through their full range of motion and their added resistance, that always gets your muscles to receive a double stimulus, that of stretching and that of lengthening. If I'm performing this movement, if I am flexing and extending the elbow, I am constantly flexing and fully extending both muscles, both the biceps and the triceps. What can happen is, when people fail to respect this variable of mobilizing their body segments over their full range of motion, if they fail to do that, namely, for example, when guys go into a gym, and if they perform arm curls using just like a shorter
range of motion.
Shorter range of motion. Thank you. Then what happens is that if they never fully extend, what happens is that their biceps is fully contracted, but then never gets to fully extend. And if the biceps doesn't get to fully extend, then it has the tendency to start getting chronically shortened. And so every time you train, you fully contract the biceps, but then fail to fully extend it, then the biceps starts getting chronically shortened. Because the distance between your body segments didn't change, something has to give, and what happens is that whenever the muscle starts getting chronically shortened, it means that it's the tendon that starts getting chronically lengthened, in order to compensate for the loss in muscle lengthening. And as the tendon starts getting chronically lengthened, then eventually it can rupture. Right. And there are several known cases of guys who perform strength training in such a way to every once in a while sustain injuries to the tendons of their biceps. And for the most part, it's usually not bad luck. It's just like when it happens, it usually was just like the last straw that broke the camel's back, in the sense that it was like the outcome of many months, many years of just like shortening their muscles, contracting their muscles, getting them to become chronically shortened because they failed to compensate by also fully extending them after every muscle contraction.
I mean, we can go into this next part, which I know that you're going to jump in soon, which is the eccentric training. But I wanted to put, I think, that image into people's mind that we were talking about, right? You know, people are hitting the gym and they're lifting weights and they're like, well, you know, I feel that when I do weight training and I'm doing strength training as we normally perceive it with weights in the gym, etc., and high repetitions and max repetitions, right? I feel less and less flexible. And it's like, sure, but that's your image, that's what you're hitting in the gym. But if you do any kind of flexibility exercise, if you do like yoga or just stretching at your house, you're just stretching normally the opposite muscles of that which you use, right? Which is what you're saying in the bicep or the legs. For example, if you do leg extensions, right, even just at home, to gain more flexibility, you're just contracting the opposite muscles of what you usually use, which is your quadricep, right? And it's that simple. And then there was the example I also thought of, I thought it would fit quite well. Correct me if I'm wrong about it, which is Nordic curls, which is very famous. Do you know Nordic curls?
I know of them, yes.
Right, it's eccentric motion, and then it works your flexibility, and it also works your speed.
Yeah.
Because people who complete it then go to try run, and they're like, wait, all of a sudden I have better flexibility and speed from doing eccentric exercise that was strength-based. I'm
Exactly.
correct, right? I don't know. And so I think, I just wanted to add that little bit there.
And so the thing is that, there is such a thing. Just as muscles physically shorten, they also physically are lengthened, are stretched in order to return to their neutral position, ideally. And so the same way that there is a phenomenon, which is that of muscles physically shortening, there is also the complementary phenomenon of muscles being lengthened. And so there is such a thing as flexibility, in the sense of there is such a thing as stretching, muscles being stretched. But the thing is that muscles naturally get stretched as you undergo strength training. And then what happens is that, just like strength, the generation of strength is muscle specific and angle specific, the ability of the muscles to sustain stretching, being lengthened, is also muscle specific, angle specific, and movement characteristic specific. What does this mean? This means that, for example, you can perform static stretching. You can like lift your leg and or like bend forward, bend in order to stretch your hamstring, and you just like hold your position in order to statically keep your hamstring stretched in that stretched position, like for a few seconds. Or, as you mentioned earlier, you can like lift your leg very quickly in order to produce like a quick stretching of the hamstrings. So you're in both situations you are stretching the same muscle, the hamstrings, but in one circumstance you are, through movement, getting it to stretch rapidly. Through the opposite situation, through holding a position, you are getting it to be kept statically in the same stretched position, lengthened position for a few seconds.
Right.
And so what happens is that stretching, and whenever you perform either of the exercises, you improve your ability to stretch your muscle in that context. If you perform static stretching, you will improve your ability to sustain static stretches. If you perform dynamic stretches, you will improve your ability for your muscles to sustain dynamic stretches. And we're talking about two different skills, and not only do they fail to transfer from one to the other in a positive way, they can even transfer negatively, in the sense that, for example, almost all sports performance is dynamic. A footballer, a combat sports athlete, they lift their leg dynamically in order to kick their opponent, to kick a ball, or like a volleyball player or a tennis player, or an American football quarterback. Like they go through a dynamic motion with their forearm in order to generate explosive strength. And what happens is that sports performance is mostly, almost like probably 99% of sport performance revolves around movement, about dynamically displacing your body segments in space. And using the example of the hamstrings, if you warm up for your sport-specific performance using static stretches, that will actually hinder your sport-specific performance. Static stretches actually transfer negatively onto dynamic stretches, onto actual human performance based on dynamic movements. And so that's also another thing that falls under the sports BS concept, which is that traditionally, I don't know why, I don't know its origin, it became trendy, initially trendy, and then probably eventually like it became like tradition for people to warm up using static stretches, but that actually hinders performance, okay? And so in order to improve, your performance will require will require you to move your body dynamically in space, then your warm-up should also consist of dynamic movements. And what happens is that as a warm-up, you should like perform a few sets where you move your body in space at a slow pace in order to little by little increase your range of motion, but dynamically. And then after a few sets of having increased your ability to move your body in space through a wider range of motion, then you start doing it faster in order to add speed, in order to add explosiveness and explosive and faster stretching into that increased range of the dynamic range of motion.
Okay.
And then ultimately one last thing is that so is static stretching then useless? No, static stretching has one utility to it, which is that, as I covered already, like sports performance and sports training tends to be repetitive. Okay, you tend to repeat like the same movement pattern, the same like half a dozen movement patterns for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever the case may be. And one of the outcomes of that is that the muscles that you solicit the most on a routine basis, at the end of training, they tend to be a little bit shortened, okay? And if you just like avoid stretching altogether at the end of the training session and just like hit the shower and go home, then you run the risk of starting to develop like chronically shortened muscles, which is very well known in terms of posture when people start having like shoulders rounded forward, because the anterior muscles have started to get like chronically shortened from all the explosive actions of propelling things forward. And so what happens is that, so when should you use static stretches, and for what purpose? You should use static stretches not during warm-up, but at the end of your training sessions, and not to improve your range of motion, but to get your muscles to relax, especially the ones that through the repetitive practice involved in your sport-specific performance, the muscles that at the end of your training session or your competition got to be a little bit chronically shortened, to get them to like relax and return to their neutral range of motion, so that
the neutral length,
the neutral length, so that they don't overload the tendons and they don't start generating bad postures and stuff like that.
Okay, awesome. That was really, really good.
I
wanted there's many things that we could talk about even more in your book, and there was even a couple questions I had about there just to know more. But there was one last point I wanted to touch here, because it was more about endurance, which is a topic we didn't touch on much. I think this came from a book, and that's why I took it as a question.
Yes.
The question is, why must we expand physical conditioning beyond the mere development of endurance? I don't know if you remember what you were talking about in the book there. If not, we can also skip the question.
Expand my physical conditioning
Beyond the mere development of endurance.
I believe what I had in mind when I wrote that is that so basically, what's endurance? Endurance is your ability to sustain performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, like in order to try to keep things as simple as I can, let's once again return to this. Use the same example of like flexing your elbow. So you're at the gym performing arm curls. All our muscles have energy within them. And like always ready to go, always ready to be used. And that's why you are able at any given moment to just like stand up and run to catch the bus or whatever. You're able to immediately increase your energy consumption and get your muscles to contract more powerfully instantaneously, because all muscles always have like muscle with energy within them. But the thing is that energy, and so I'm able to immediately get to the gym and pick up a dumbbell and start performing arm curls. But the thing is that very powerful energy substrate that is present within our muscle cells only lasts for like 6 to 7 seconds. Let's say 6 seconds. After which it needs to be renovated. And your ability to renovate that, to renovate the energy within the muscle cell, will determine whether you are able to sustain your performance or not. So, for example, I start performing arm curls, and after 6 seconds, I have to renovate the energy that was initially that I resorted to in order to start performing my movement. And so, like after 10 repetitions, I either have to stop because I'm not able to renew the energy, or I am able to renew the energy and I am able to continue pushing through and performing more repetitions.
Right.
And obviously that, because after 6 seconds, you need to renew the energy. Sorry.
You're good.
That always calls for added. Sorry.
Yeah, you can have some water. I'll have some too.
That always calls for added chemical reactions. And whenever you have to perform, your body has to perform more chemical reactions, it always takes more time. If it takes more time, it means that it takes you longer to produce energy, so you're not able to keep your movement at the same pace. Okay, so that's what happens. So like you perform, you are able for the first 6 seconds to perform arm curls like very fast. After 6 seconds, you start using a different energy system, and because that different energy system includes or requires additional chemical reactions, you need to slow down. You need to take a step back in terms of intensity, in terms of pace, but still at a slower pace you are able to continue performing the action. And as lactic acid builds up, then eventually it may be called upon for you to resort to a third type of energy system, which requires even more chemical reactions, longer to produce energy, and so which is called the aerobic system. And so that means that you are able to continue producing your movement, in this case the elbow flexion, the arm curl,
Right.
but at an even slower pace. And so what does this mean? This means that Endurance is your ability to sustain performance over time, and so it means that endurance is your ability to supply your muscles with the energy that they need for the movement that they are performing. Ultimately, what's the bottom line? The bottom line is that just like with muscle shortening and just like with muscle stretching, muscle lengthening, also the bioenergetics of muscles, the ability of muscles to use energy in order to sustain movement is muscle specific. Okay, and this is very intuitive for people, in the sense that everyone knows. You just think of any two high achieving endurance athletes from two different sports: a long marathon runner and the winner of the Tour de France in cycling, or the winner of some like Nordic skiing event, or a swimmer who swims like for 5 hours. You recognize that they are like the best in each of their respective sports. You empirically recognize that they are all great endurance athletes. They all have great endurance. But you also recognize that each of them is the best at their specific sport. And so and why is that? Because when it comes to endurance, when it comes to sustaining your performance over time, you have two components contributing to this. You have what is called like a central component, your ability to take in oxygen, your lung ability in order to process the exchanges of putting oxygen in your blood and putting carbon dioxide back outside of your blood in order to expel it in order to put it out. And so you have this central component that takes place as you're breathing and your lungs, in terms of your lungs, as you are like using oxygen and throwing out carbon dioxide. And this central component is common to all endurance athletes. But then once the oxygen has been injected into your bloodstream, and then it is sent through the blood, it arrives at the muscle cells, then the ability of the muscles to use the oxygen in order to sustain movement is specific of the muscle cells. And so that's why the cyclist is able to improve his or her central component, endurance central component, but he or she is also able to improve the ability of the specific muscles used in the cycling action to use oxygen and in order to sustain their movement over the course of over time. And because the movements, the motor pattern of a runner, of a skier, of a swimmer is all these different movement patterns are different from that of the cyclist. It means that this periphery component is the one that will determine your ability to sustain your sport specific performance over time.
In a specific
manner. Okay. So again, this gets us to go back to the initial concept of sports. Is it all BS? Traditionally, at least for a few decades, there was the tradition, the culture of people just wanting to improve their performance through running and through long distance running. I want to improve my performance. I want to be fit, for my basketball performance. I want to be fit for my tennis performance. I want to be fit and well conditioned for my combat sports performance. And it used to be very tradition for people to just go out and go for a long run, either around their neighborhood, a park, the track, or whatever.
It still is though. Like even for football nowadays, they make you run laps, or like in the preseason you have to run 40 minutes before. I'm just adding that in.
So. Okay, so it saddens me to know that that's still the case, and so because the thing is that by going out and just going like for a run, and just it's better than sitting at home on a couch, and so you improve the central component of that is involved in sustaining your performance over time, but that it doesn't improve your sport specific the ability of the muscles involved in your sport specific performance. And I know for example that a very well known football or soccer coach, Portuguese soccer coach called Mourinho, he started being a professional coach in Portugal, I think in the year 2000. And you can find it in one of his books, or one of the books written on him. The information that when he started coaching, I believe it was the second team that he started coaching, Leiria, one of like the very strange, revolutionary things that he brought into training was that during pre-season he didn't have his athletes, the players, perform any type of long distance running. He had them performing like soccer specific drills in which instead of running linearly, they had to run non-linearly, like changing directions, and then they would do so while also having to handle the ball, and they would handle the ball also ideally under circumstances that led them to also simultaneously start thinking tactically, thinking the game from a tactical standpoint, and so he was able through sport-specific exercises. So, because like the central component, the heart is the lungs are always working and the heart is always pumping blood. But my lungs can be working and my heart can be pumping blood while I'm undergoing like a linear long distance run, and I can have my heart, my lungs working and my heart pumping blood at the same time that I'm moving non-linearly. I am coordinating myself with the ball, or if I'm a combat sports guy, I'm kicking the bag or the bag or the pads, or like or my training partner, and so I can instead of just isolating the central component, which is even like the easiest thing to train, and then eventually even like the one which ends up being less impactful on sports specific performance, through sport specific drills, I am able to still activate and stimulate the lungs and the heart, the central component, but on top of that, I kill two birds with one stone. I also get my sport specific muscles to produce more mitochondria, to incur in the specific biochemical adaptations that they need to incur in, that take place within the specific muscle cells that are being solicited within your sport specific movements. And so again, sustaining one's performance over time. Is it a training variable? Is it a performance variable? Yes, there is such a thing as stamina, your ability to maintain your performance at a given intensity level over time. Is it a performance element? Yes. Is it a training variable? Yes. But should it be a training variable that you isolate from your sport-specific performance in order to train by itself? By itself? No, because by doing so, you are only touching on the central component, and that ends up being just like a tiny fragment of your overall specific performance, and it ends up being a tiny fragment of your endurance. Your endurance, basically, simply put, is movement specific. Okay, so ideally, just like focus on your sport specific performance, sport specific movements, and because if you do so, you train your coordinative skills, you train your tactical skills, and you develop. If you perform your sport specific movements against added resistances, you also get those muscles to contract more intensely in a very specific way. And if you do that over time and through like using like sets and reps and whatever, as you would do like on the track, you get your body to also improve its ability to sustain, from an energetic standpoint, sustain your performance over time. Okay.
Perfect. That's great. That's a great way to end it. I think you did like a perfect 1 minute, 2 minute resuming of that topic. Okay. So perfect. We have to wrap it up, unfortunately, because I know you also have to go. So I would like to just go through the last few passes really quick, and then you're free. The first question, because this is the part where we run through, I think we'll keep the question short, just one or two.
Okay.
Very shortly, 1 minute. What is your philosophy for life?
My philosophy for life in 1 minute.
Yes.
My philosophy for life basically revolves around, like, I got a formula from a Canadian volleyball coach whose team at the time had been like national champions like 4 years in a row, and he told me once a very interesting thing, which was that he said, I was really bad at maths when I was at school, but there was one formula that I was able to understand really well, which is that performance equals skill minus distractions. Okay. And for me, my perception, my understanding, my belief is that this formula applies equally well to life, and in life, most of the distractions, which ended up being distractions as well, most of the distractions usually come from social pressures. Okay, trying to live up to other people's expectations, trying to maintain some sort of social persona, public persona. And so my philosophy of life basically revolves around looking to limit distractions, limit the interferences that social dynamics have on me, so that then I am able to experience life in the most authentic manner as I can.
I actually really like that. I like the part of the formula, so thank you for sharing that. We have a question from our last guest.
Okay.
Paulo Martins says, also keep it as short as you would like. How can you explain unconditional love?
Well, for me, unconditional love basically means acceptance, total acceptance. Obviously that, if, for example, if I notice that you are a very clumsy person, either emotionally or even like in terms of movement, in terms of coordination. And if people around you get hurt, like for example physically, if you like are always dropping objects on people's feet, or if people get hurt emotionally because like you're clumsy from a human relation standpoint, I may selfishly look to keep my distance. But looking to keep my distance in order to safeguard myself doesn't mean that I need you to change for me. Okay? And so I can keep my distance out of respect for my own well-being, but at the same time, I can accept you as you are. Okay? And so unconditional love for me is acceptance. And so, and if it's acceptance and conditional acceptance, it means that I am not placing my acceptance of you dependent on any conditions. I don't need you to be X, Y, or Z. Okay? And then I personally, I try my best. Obviously, I'm still a work in progress, but I try my best to apply this in my relationships. And so, if you ask me for a favor, and if I agree to help you, I agree to help you out of friendship and out of total acceptance for you, without keeping score, without having an agenda, without having a personal agenda of thinking that by helping you now, I will be ensuring that later on I can call on a favor from you. No, if I decide to help you, I decide to help you without having an agenda, without having any conditions. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, simply put, bottom line for me, unconditional love boils down to acceptance of the other.
All right. Thank you. And now it's your turn to leave a question for the next guest. What would you like to leave for the next guest? Can be any topic. Doesn't have to be a topic we talked about. It can be anything you'd like.
A question for the next guest. I would then probably go with. Okay. So the question I would leave for your next guest would be, why do you believe that you are entitled to have expectations of other people? Why do you think you are entitled to project expectations of other people onto the relationships that you keep with them?
Okay. But when you say project expectations, you're projecting your own expectations on them and the relationships, right?
Yeah. So basically, why?
I'll read it out and you see if it's correct. Why do you believe that you are entitled to have expectations of other people?
Yeah, that's the best
or
way.
Project your expectations on the relationships you keep with them.
Yeah. So basically, so I would say that projecting one's expectations ends up being like the outcome. The original thing, I would say that it all, like the engine, like the epicenter, is from the start having expectations of the people. And so probably linked to what you just asked me, linked to approaching life conditionally. Even when you look to approach life in a loving way, you do so through conditional love. Okay, and why do you think you are entitled to experience life and love in a conditional manner? Okay. Why do you think that you are entitled to have expectations of other people, and thus condition the level of acceptance of love that you share with them.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Luis, for
Thank you
coming
for
on the
having me.
podcast. I enjoyed very much reading your book and then discussing it with you. I'm glad the audience gets to listen to your opinion now, and so thank you for coming on. I'd
Thank
also
you.
like to thank the area that we got to film this in. It's Put It On coffee shop here in Lisbon. If you're interested, I'll drop a link in below, and you guys can check it out where it is. And thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.